On January 15th, 1919, a 3 million-gallon tidal wave of molasses moved through Boston at 35 miles per hour. And it wasn't the disaster everyone remembers. The official story goes like this. A massive tank ruptured, sticky syrup swallowed the north end, and the city drowned in sweetness. Visceral, cinematic, mostly misleading. The real story isn't about the molasses at all. It's about what the disaster revealed and what America chose to ignore. Let's count down the 5 layers of this disaster, each one exposing something darker than the last. We'll start with the surface and work our way down to what really mattered. Number 5, the physics nobody expected. The tank held 3 million gallons of raw molasses, a commodity Boston refined for rum and export. At 41 degrees Fahrenheit that January morning, the syrup was thick, slow-moving. But the tank's metal shell, weakened by corrosion and poor maintenance, couldn't hold the weight. When it failed, the molasses didn't ooze. It exploded outward at 35 miles per hour, faster than a sprinting human. The wave was 25 feet tall. 21 people died. Hundreds were buried under warm, sticky sludge. Horses drowned. Buildings were flattened. The syrup coated every surface, hardened, and stayed there for months. Cleanup crews chipped at it for weeks. But the death toll was almost secondary to what came next. Number 4, the corporate immunity. The United States Industrial Alcohol Company owned the tank. They'd known about structural problems. They'd ignored repair recommendations. They'd cut corners. And when the disaster happened, they hired the best lawyers money could buy. The trials dragged on for 6 years. In the end, the company paid damages, roughly $300,000 total, split among victims. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $5 million today. For 21 deaths and a destroyed neighborhood. The verdict was clear. Corporations faced almost no real consequences. This wasn't unique. It was the norm. Factory explosions, mine collapses, building fires, they happened constantly. Companies paid fines, apologized, and continued operating exactly as before. The system wasn't broken. It was working as designed. Number 3, the neighborhood that nobody cared about. The North End was Boston's Italian immigrant quarter. Working-class families, tenement housing, no political power. When the molasses flooded their streets, the city's response was minimal. Cleanup was slow. Compensation was meager. Rebuilding happened on the victim's dime, not the city's. If this had happened in Back Bay or Beacon Hill, the wealthy districts, the response would have been immediate and overwhelming. The disaster exposed class inequality in plain sight. The poor neighborhood suffered. The corporation escaped. The city moved on. This was American infrastructure in 1919, built by the disposable, owned by the powerful. Number 2, the regulatory failure. Before 1919, there were almost no safety standards for industrial tanks. No inspections. No requirements for structural engineering. Companies built whatever they wanted, however cheaply. The molasses disaster didn't change this immediately. It took decades for meaningful safety regulations. The tank that failed would pass inspection in 1920, 1925, even 1930. The system had no mechanism to learn from catastrophe. This was true across America. Bridge collapses, train derailments, building fires. Each one was treated as an isolated incident, not a systemic problem. There was no federal safety agency, no OSHA, no mandatory reporting, just corpses and corporate liars. Number 1, the forgotten lesson. Here's what makes the Molasses flood genuinely significant, and what we've almost entirely forgotten. The disaster was a perfect storm: negligence, profit-seeking, regulatory absence, and a vulnerable community. Every single element was preventable. Every death was unnecessary. But America's response was to move forward, not look back. The tank's location was chosen for convenience, not safety. It was placed near a residential neighborhood because land was cheap there. The company knew about structural problems, but delayed repairs. The city had no authority to mandate safety standards. When disaster struck, the victims had no legal recourse. The company faced minimal consequences, and the whole system continued unchanged. This wasn't unique to Boston. This was America. Factories exploded, mines collapsed, buildings burned, corporations profited, workers died, communities suffered, and the government did almost nothing. The Molasses flood was just one visible instance of a much larger pattern, one we didn't adequately address until the 1970s, when federal safety regulations finally became law. The story we tell about the Molasses flood, the one about a giant wave of syrup, the striking images, the unusual tragedy, it's memorable precisely because it obscures the real story. We remember the spectacle. We forget the negligence. We forget the inequality. We forget that 21 people died because a corporation chose profit over safety and faced almost no consequences. The Molasses wasn't the disaster. The system was. And when we reduce this event to a quirky historical footnote, a weird day when syrup destroyed a city, we miss the actual point. We become complicit in the same forgetting that allowed it to happen in the first place. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919 wasn't a disaster about molasses. It was a disaster about what we're willing to accept and what we're willing to forget. Subscribe for more cinematic history that reframes the